Welcome to the College Knowledge Podcast, sponsored by the College Planning Network and Paradigm Financial Group. Whether you're searching for that right fit college, applying to college, or figuring out how you're going to afford it all, you're in the right place. You'll hear from deans, admissions counselors, student athletes, and scholars from esteemed universities and colleges around the country. We'll dig deep to uncover their insight and unique experiences. So whether you're a student gearing up for college or a parent with college-bound kids, sit back, relax, and listen. Like you, we have lots of questions. Our guests have the answers, and we're excited to share them with you. Let's get started.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of College Knowledge. I'm here with Dave, the CEO. I'm Joe, the college pro. We're here to tell you everything you need to know. So when it comes to college, you don't say, oh, no.
We're going to have a really good guest at the end of this, Joe, which is going to be, I think, really insightful for people. And we're going to be talking a lot about the college essay today.
Oh, yeah. College essays. People are getting ready to either tune in or be scared.
I mean, I think the real question that people always ask is, does the college essay still matter? Are students being coached too much? Is AI taking over? What's the reality of the college essay?
I mean, there's a couple articles we'll get into for our College Confidential. They're going to touch just on that topic. But I think there's a lot that goes into the essay, maybe something that gets overlooked. I think people may not realize how important it actually is in this process, especially in today's day and age, as the admissions process has changed from like a test optional type of situation. And I also think that some of the outside forces, believe it or not, the Supreme Court has said some things like, hey, you can't accept people based on certain criteria, but an essay can maybe fit their criteria. You don't
Differentiator,
know.
right?
Yeah. So
I love
definitely has an idea.
I love when we can get an expert on the show specific to this. And we will do a pretty awesome interview with Alan Gelb in a little bit, who's a professional college essay coach and writer himself. And we'll get into a lot of that.
Yeah. So why don't we get started with College Confidential?
Let's do it.
So, Dave, one article I pulled up for today was about AI and using AI for those wonderful college essays.
Yep.
Pretty shocking stat that someone who actually was reading said they would, over their career, read 10,000 essays in the admissions office and started to realize that, well, I'm seeing a lot of similar things, similar words, similar sentences. And they started to find out, like, out of 100 essays, 45 of them were basically somewhat assisted by AI.
Yeah.
They did a deeper dive into the study. They found out that it's about 45% of students are using AI from the brainstorming standpoint. There's about 27% that are using it to write their first draft, and about 10% are just straight up using what AI gives them as their college essay.
Ignorance is bliss, I guess, in some instincts. And AI can put out some good stuff, no question about it. Like, very powerful tool, useful in a lot of ways. But to think that it's not recognized, I think, is foolish, right? If AI can create it, AI can audit it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So the same power that helps you craft is the same power that helps determine if it was crafted by you or someone else or by artificial intelligence. I'm not one to stand on the pulpit here and say, don't use it. But in this particular instance, I think you have a moral and ethical dilemma with using it, especially when it's something around a personal statement or it's something around something that's supposed to mean something to you, a narrative about yourself. It's difficult to do that without putting the time, effort, and energy into it, right?
Yeah. I mean, I look at it, I use AI. I think it's how you use it is huge. I think the idea, tell me where your thoughts are on this, that if my son doesn't have the ability to have someone edit something, if I read it and I was like, I don't know, like, is this the proper way to do something or not? But basically prompt AI to say, don't rewrite this, treat this as an editor. Please highlight the mistakes that I have. Is that wrong if it's your draft and now you're using AI from that? It's not necessarily crafting, but basically helping you make sure that you're avoiding some mistakes. Like, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, I use it as an editor for me every day. If I'm about to create, a document to send out to the universe on college planning or college admissions, I'm gonna pump it through, and it's gonna say, hey, you might restructure this, you might think differently about that. Again, I think it's a slippery slope. There are obviously the benefits to it. I just think that what is going to become more prevalent is the assumption that everybody is using it in a personal statement or an essay or a narrative-driven environment. Don't you really want to stand out? And so is it possible to stand out using the AI components as a proactive instead of a reactive tool? I think using it the way you mentioned is probably a really intelligent way to do it. But again, you don't want to be one of the ones that just gets lumped in with a statistic. And how sophisticated will you be, or will the future be, to say that this was written by a person or this was written by AI? I mean, I think in some cases, knowing that you did it, that sort of moral compass on it is important, right? I mean, it's 650 words. It's not a life's work. It's a couple of weeks in the working on it room. So
yeah, I think, I mean, again, if you're, no matter how you're working on it, it takes time, it takes effort. And if AI can help utilize your time, I think wisely, I'm a very strong component of work smarter, not harder. But if you're still willing to put in the work and use some tools that can be extremely valuable and use them the right way, but you're still putting in that work, I think that's where
the differentiator.
Yeah, using it as a shortcut is a different tool completely.
Yeah.
I think that's why I would go into it. The other piece, and this touches on, is the essay important or not? So it was a story that was making the rounds this year. A student, we had a 1590 on the SAT, a 4.5 GPA, had started an app that had $20 million in revenue and was rejected from 15 colleges. I immediately, when read that, said, man, I would love to read this person's essay. Would love to. It just so happens they posted it. This essay was not great. Let me put it that way. It basically went into, I never thought college was for me. Here's all the reasons that I'm wonderful. Here's the business I started. Here's, my SAT, everything that I do, I'm perfect at. So I didn't think that college could teach me anything. Now I'm learning that I think I want to go to college, and I can be moved to now want to attend. So the first paragraph basically said, here's every reason that you shouldn't accept me.
Yeah.
And then the last paragraph was, but I've changed my mind since then. Pretty amazing. And if you think that the essay has nothing to do, if it's just good GPA, it's good test scores, nope.
No, it is certainly a differentiating factor that the schools have access to. And the more competitive the school, the more it's going to be weighted, the more important it is. It's the one thing in the application process where you can take some liberty, you can take some risk, you can say something different and express yourself differently, right? Everybody fills out an application. Everybody puts their credential and what they've earned and achieved, right? And so on paper, you can have two people that are virtually identical.
Yep.
And one essay just moves the reader, and that one gets the stamp, whereas the other one doesn't. And so I would take it seriously for sure.
Yeah. And I think the one thing that, again, the essay is not the application. I know we've had a couple episodes, and one thing that's always stuck out with me, I forget who told us this. I wish I could actually quote them, but they said the essay is your chance to say whatever you want that's not included in that application, right? They don't need to know that you got good grades. Like, it's there, right? They don't need to know that you worked for this award. It's already there. If all you're doing is rehashing what's in the application, they're not learning anything more about you. It's not there. So the idea of taking that opportunity to highlight kind of who you are, right? Outside of, like you're saying, differentiate yourself.
Yeah.
Right. What can make you kind of stand out from the crowd and everybody else that has the same test score and GPA that you do? It can help and hurt depending on how well it's written. So I definitely think it's extremely important. And again, the idea of now a lot of schools being test optional, Dave, how do you differentiate? Okay, you got GPAs. Well, GPAs have been inflated tremendously. The idea of grades and GPAs are at an all-time high right now.
Yeah.
SAT scores are at an all-time low. Okay, so you got a great GPA, you don't submit a test score. How is a college admissions counselor supposed to know exactly who they're getting if they accept you? So I think it definitely has to be more than just that grades and test scores in the essay. Don't overlook it. It's, I think, extremely important. And probably, in my opinion, I would say it's more important than it has been in the past.
Yeah.
That's where I would sit with it.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
It's that opportunity.
Yeah. That is today's segment of College Confidential. All right. So, Dave, that's going to move us on to our next segment. We're going to put each other on the hot seat. We'll see how this segment essentially works itself out. But for a first go round for the new season, get a little hot seat action, put each other on the spot, ask a question with a quick answer as fast as we can. If you could read one student essay again, which one sticks out with you?
Oh, I mean, I can remember the intro sentence is that I remember the first time I held a human skull. And I was like, what? The kid wanted to be a pathologist. It was just one of those essays where, like, my God, that kid is that. Yep. Check in if I was at the admission side. And it was all about that, how that led to his desire to understand the human body, anatomy, and forensics led. And so it was just a well-crafted essay around a very specific desire.
Yeah. Love it.
Joe.
Yes.
What's one thing about the essay process that should change?
Ooh, personally, my thought, right? Hot seat.
Hot seat.
If you were to ask me, what should change? I think that the essay should be something that's part of the application, but it's almost like an SAT, where
Like timed?
it's a timed, hey, I don't have time resources. It's here's a question, give me a answer on the spot. How well can you write an essay right now without help, without edits? An admissions officer would know they're not going to be perfect.
Yep.
But that's the one thing that I would, if I had my say, I would say, all right, hey, part of the admissions process is you get a scheduled time. You don't know what the question is, whether it's an email and you have an hour to submit it. Like you got to go, right? You got to be able to think on your feet, critically think, diagnose a problem, whatever it might be, and give your answer right away. That's the one thing that I think should change.
That would be remarkable.
Yeah, it would be. Dave, what's one writing skill that pays off forever?
Okay, I'm gonna take a liberty on this. It's not a writing skill. It is good writing. That is a skill that will pay forever. Learn how to write. Communication is paramount. It is something that will, if you can not only do, but then communicate in written form what you did and what should be done, the world is your oyster. So I don't think it's a skill within writing. I think it is writing as a skill.
I've heard people say write every day. You get better every time you do it, and it's something, if you continue to do it every day, you get better at it, and it becomes extremely valuable throughout your lifetime.
All right, Joe, last one for you. What's the weirdest metaphor analogy you've seen in a student essay?
Oh, I guess this could count would it count as a metaphor? Because the one that always sticks out to me, read an essay, how Madden football on Xbox changed the student's life. Would that be a metaphor? I don't know. I guess it's not really a metaphor, but
close enough. Just,
it's weird, right? But it was a wonderful written essay that really highlighted who this person was. They had some social disorders and always had trouble socializing and interacting with other students, just people in general. Really started to enjoy Madden football, was able to start kind of socializing with headsets and talking to people online, ended up starting a group at the school, became the president, where they had annual tournaments that raised money for his condition. And it became an ongoing charity that would be at the high school long after he was gone. But it basically was how he explained in the essay how this video game helped him become someone that was social and can now interact with people that without it, he wasn't sure if he would be at where he's at today. But it was very interesting, and you kind of read it and like, a video game changed your life. Okay, what, he wouldn't be a game designer? No, not at all. It was just how I took this lesson and built it into something and built upon it, started a group, became the president, did all these things. It was a pretty well written, and it went somewhere I didn't think it was going to go.
It's time for the main interview. So without further ado, let's bring him on. Today, we have a wonderful guest, the distinguished pleasure of interviewing Alan Gelb. He is a professional writer, writing coach, and author, best known for his work helping students craft compelling college admissions essays. His most well-known book is Conquering the College Admission Essay in 10 Steps, which has become widely used as a guide for high school students preparing to apply for college. Alan, welcome to the show. We're honored to have you.
Good to be here. Thank you.
So nobody starts as a college admission essay expert, right? Can you give us a little background as how you got here?
So I come to this work from a very different place than a lot of people who are doing this work, which is out of the admissions world. I come to it out of the writing world, and everything that I do has to do with writing. So I've been a novelist, I've been published playwright, writer of a number of nonfiction books, essays that have appeared in New York Times and Daily Beast. And so for me, I come to it from two places, as a writer and as a parent, because I first started doing this work with my own sons, who are now in their 40s. We live in a small town in upstate New York, which was a very nice town with a nice school, but they didn't have anybody who was really nailing the essay piece of the application process. So I put my mind to that, began working with other people in the town and friends and so forth, and I developed some theories about this assignment that evolved into this book. And basically, everything that I do is based on narrative.
And so the idea, and just to sort of give my feedback to the listening audience, right? This is someone who comes from the writing side to teach you how to write a better essay, not the lip service side, for lack of a better expression, of like what the admissions may tell you, right? And we've done an episode before, and it was about the focus of the admissions professional, or the essay professional we used before, was passion, right? He always wanted people to bring passion through in whatever their essay was. Can you talk a little bit about what you think makes a really good college essay for an individual? that narrative piece you said.
So first of all, and I don't want to be snarky here, but I always advise students to take out the word passion, the single most overused word in college essays, and it's become filler, totally filler. I want them to show passion, but not to state that they are passionate about anything.
Love that.
Good tip. So I have an article that I always send students that I work with, and I work with about 50 students a year. And the article that I send that I've written is called Demystifying the College Admissions Essay. And I say that the central task of this essay is to persuade the admissions committee to invite you into their community, right? That's their job. They need to make up a community, right? So they need to make sure that they take in people with the right academic credentials, the right skills and talents, whether you're an oboist or a lacrosse player or whatever. But they also want to make sure that everybody that they take in has the right human qualities to allow them to prosper in that community. One of the purposes of this essay is that it's kind of a diagnostic tool. Okay. They want to make sure that this person is not going to spend the day in bed, not going to make trouble for the roommate, not going to, God forbid, drop out and skew all their metrics. And so what we do in these essays is to reflect human qualities that we all value and that others value in us. Things like empathy, self-reflection, determination, humor is a really nice ingredient if it works for you. And that's really a central task of this assignment.
In speaking to that, what was just going through my mind is obviously you want to do as much as you can on a piece of paper to tell this person, stranger who's reading it, the type of person you are, right? You want to basically tell that narrative and say, hey, I'm a good person or I'm not. Is the purpose of an essay to get you accepted, or is the purpose of an essay to say, this is who I am, take me or don't? And maybe we're not a good fit. Like, is that a different psychological way that people should look at the essay?
No, I would say the former. Yes, your goal here is to get accepted. If you get accepted and you go make a campus visit and it's not your place, then you say no, right? But certainly we want to collect as many acceptances as we can to have a lot of latitude in making our decisions. Getting to your point, another thing I mentioned in this article that I've written is that you want to convey quite a bit of information about who you are. And it's actually kind of amazing how much information can be packed into a 650-word essay. To do that, and I may talk about this later, to do that requires certain writing capabilities. You know, you want to know where to start an essay. You don't want to waste any time at all in this essay. So I can talk about that more later. But getting back to the point of what this essay is meant to do, convey information, okay? Back in the old days, which I can talk about because I'm older, you would go to a college campus and you would be interviewed, right? Well, that's not happening anymore, correct? If you see somebody on campus, not so much, you might see an upper class person or some lower level person in an admissions department or something like that. And it's really more for your benefit to convey information to you rather than for the interviewer to form impressions about you. The essay is really the place where you can put your thumbprint on something, okay? On paper, you could look just like somebody else, right? But particularly if you're applying to one of the higher level schools, where everybody has amazing grades and amazing this and amazing that. And students that I work with totally amaze me, I have to say. But the essay is the place where you can differentiate yourself from that other person and kind of jump out from the pack. So to do that, obviously, you have to let the person know who you are. It's not your interview so much as it's sitting next to somebody at a party or something like that and being relaxed about it and sort of, not, God forbid, you should not blow your own trumpet in this essay. That's one of the things that I think is the worst thing you can do, or in any way seem resume-like. And I often have students ask me, well, I've been a debate person for the last 6 years, and that's my whole thing, And I say, well, you could write about debate, but it can't be about your achievements in debate. It has to be about how you worked out, let's say, an interpersonal relationship with your debate partner, because that's the human side of things. And that goes back to the first point I made about what this essay must do. It must establish you as a person, right?
Yeah. And I think great advice to take is this is not a brag sheet. This is not your, I did this, I did that, I did this. I always looked at the essay as you're trying to create a connection with the reader, right? And you want more than surface level deep. If they want to know what your achievements are, they're going to look at the application. They're going to see the achievements. They're going to be listed out there, right? That's your opportunity to say that this has to be different.
A lot of that whole sort of perspective on the essay can feel very foreign to a lot of the people I work with, because a large population of whom I work with are first generation Americans, and their parents come from a completely different educational system, and they can't understand why you would want to expose any vulnerability, let's say. Exposing vulnerability vulnerability is going to make me see you more as a human being because I have vulnerabilities. I, the reader, have vulnerabilities, right? I have to have that conversation with people.
No, absolutely. And there's something we do in business. It's called infotainment, right? It's the idea that we're giving information, we're entertaining, we're creating connection differently. And some of that vulnerability always has to come out. That's why you hear stories about some of the tough times as well as the when you achieved it. Or like, I think that overcoming environment, you can't, if you don't have the struggle, you can't be the hero or you can't have the hero in the story. So some vulnerability should always exist, right? You can't overcome something if there was no struggle in the first place.
Exactly. That's the work of being a human being.
Yeah, 100%. So go ahead, Joe.
I was just going to say, with the vulnerability side of things, I know I've heard a lot of this and definitely want your take on it. The idea that every essay needs to have that trauma that was overcome. You need to have that grandiose, as Dave said, the hero. How realistic is that? I mean, obviously vulnerability is one thing, but I think a lot of people ultimately look at, we need that traumatic experience that we need to have. If we don't have that, we can't write a good essay. I feel like a lot of people have said that, or at least thought that when they're thinking about what they have to write.
And that's a really good question. And it goes right to the heart of what I do, because it goes back to this feeling of narrative. Okay. And in my book, the first chapter lets people know what the elements of a narrative are. I distill them down to 4. I won't go into them now, I think, because it'll take too much. So my process is as follows. Okay. I ask students to read the first 2 chapters of my book. Then they answer a set of questions that are in the second chapter, which are far-ranging. What's keeping you up at night? If you close your eyes and imagine a special place in the world, what is that place? When has your mind and body ever felt in perfect harmony or disharmony? Things like that that you really have to think about and maybe never thought about before. Then we have our first and longest meeting to go over those answers, okay? At the outset of that meeting, I let people know that you're going to write a narrative, but there are 2 kinds of narrative. Okay, now I'm going to get into your question, Joe. Okay, so I tell them there's a capital N narrative. Okay, something very big has happened in the student's life. Student has had an illness, serious illness. Student's parent has had a serious illness. There's been a death in the family. There's been severe financial reversals, let's say. Or it could be a highly atypical and, deeply dramatic event. I got lost in the woods for 24 hours, okay? Everybody wants to read those stories. Everybody wants to know how these major conflicts come out. And conflict is one of those 4 elements that I talk about in my book. Tension and conflict, that has to be in the essay. Then I say, well, most students don't have that. And looking at your answers, you don't have that. So we go in small narrative direction, where we are basically writing a reflective essay. More reflection in that essay than there is in the first essay, because in the first type of essay, the capital N, a lot of stuff has to be put out on paper. I was in the woods, I fought the bear, I was hungry. But in the smaller end, you have a lot of room for reflection. And that's what you do there, is you create a narrative framework, okay? You take an activity that's pretty simple, and in most cases, the less dramatic, the better. But I've had students use all kinds of hobbies, everything from baking and cooking to running 5K races to archery. I had a girl write about falconry. It's playing the accordion, you name it, okay? And they parse that narrative activity out in intermittent paragraphs. Let's say paragraph 1, paragraph 3, paragraph 5, they're doing that activity. And that only consumes maybe 100, 125 words, something like that. Leaves you like close to 500 words. That's a lot of real estate to start telling you about who you are. And so that's a very useful kind of structure. It could also be modeled around a simple activity like setting up a booth at a charity fair, grooming your dog. It just allows you to wander in a certain way, but holds the reader, because the reader wants that narrative. That's going to anchor the reader, act as this framework, and not the reader won't drift off because he or she is waiting to get to the next narrative piece of this.
And when you use that framework, just as the hypothetical, you said paragraph 1, paragraph 3, paragraph 5, in 100 words, you're explaining this activity, whatever it is, mundane or otherwise. Are you extracting lessons learned in that?
Let me take 2 minutes just to show you what an essay like that actually might look like. Okay, so let's use the example of cooking. Okay. So paragraph 1, you're chopping up onions and garlic. Paragraph 3, you're throwing in the tomatoes and the oregano. Paragraph 5, you're sitting back and waiting for the marinara sauce to develop. Okay. Haven't used hardly a lot of words left for me. Okay. So the first big section, maybe that could be several paragraphs. You establish what's going on, okay? Every Sunday since I'm this high, I've been going to my grandmother's house to cook with her. When I was little, I used a stepladder. Now I tower over my little Italian grandmother. And, while we're cooking, she's teaching me how to make gnocchi and ravioli and whatnot, but she's also giving me life lessons, okay? She's telling me about what it was like to deal with the poverty living back in Italy and growing up with the wars and coming to the US with $75 in her pocket. And I've learned a lot of lessons about perseverance and courage from her. So I'm getting a picture of this person now. I'm getting a picture of a value system. I'm getting a picture of an ethnic background, a respect of the elderly, which is something nice for me to know about the student. The next big section after that, tomatoes and garlic, oregano, whatever it was, is I take it to a very different place. I say, one of the reasons I like to be in the kitchen is because when I follow a recipe, it's kind of like following a formula, okay? And I wake up in the morning, think about science. I go to sleep at night thinking about science. And, as in the kitchen, sometimes I have a triumph and that's great. Sometimes I have a failure and have to pick myself up and move on. Sometimes I have a happy accident when the last thing I expected turns out to be a discovery that's useful. And I don't know what I want to do with the science, but whatever I do in my life, I'm going to keep my grandmother's lessons in mind as I go along on this journey. So a whole well-rounded thing. And you see how that simple narrative structure allowed me to wander without losing the attention of the reader, because the reader, even though it's not that interesting to chop up onions and oregano or whatever, it's enough to keep the reader anchored.
Yeah, it's like the thread through the whole thing. It keeps it together. And I love the concept of allowing you to wander. And I want to give my observation on your wandering in that. You didn't wander aimlessly. You're wandering on purpose. You're taking almost the liberty to explain the connection between these things and keeping it together. So you're wandering in different ways. You're explaining different components of the person that is writing it, right? The moral system, the lessons learned, the triumphs and achievements, the connection to science. You're pulling this relatively mundane activity of cooking and you're weaving in the components that make it valuable to the reader, specifically in the essay subject.
Yeah. And when I work with a student, I need to establish at the beginning. So what I do after we do the exercise with the questions is that I send them a structure. So when they're not really wandering because they have something to work with, a bit of a road. At the same time, I try to drill into them that this is your essay, okay? I'm not writing for you. I don't write for you. You're a young woman. I'm an old guy. I can't write for you. We can't sound like each other. But this is something that's useful to get you started. If you want to take this roadmap and then you see a scenic byway that you want to go down, by all means, you're the writer. I'm the editor. Everybody that works with me calls me Alan because that's a must, because I need to break down the feeling of authority, which they're used to being with teachers, but you have to break that down in order to have a fully collaborative relationship between the writer and the editor, which is a highly collaborative relationship. And so they can't be inhibited about disagreeing with me. And they do. And we hash it out and we have a good time because it's fun to talk about writing.
Yeah.
How much of your work is being the muse behind people to try and get it out of them versus really lay out structure to them? Because I mean, the structure, you can create a pretty good framework, but I mean, there's almost an inspiration that has to occur here. So,
right. That's a good question. And I do act as a muse for the students because I have a lifetime of writing experience behind me. And I have a strong intuitive sense for what could be an essay, right? When we go through those questions, I operate from the hairs on the back of my neck kind of approach.
yeah.
I sense what might be an essay. They can't do that. In my book, I try to encourage them to allow those feelings to emerge, and I give them a kind of pointers to how to let those feelings emerge. And they report back to me, my readers, that it's helpful, right? But when I'm working with a student, I'm actually saying, look, that could be an essay. And they're often surprised because they couldn't possibly imagine how that could be an essay. Connecting the different answers also works. So, you have one answer that could lead you into another answer. So it creates a multi-layered kind of effect, which is useful.
Love everything we're hearing today. I do want to touch on one thing you mentioned, you don't write for people. The idea of ghostwriting, something I'm highly against. I'm sure Dave is too. I believe you are as well. Ghostwriting, AI, read an article about, I think it was last year, it's estimated they caught about 45% of essays use some sort of AI, whether not to just fully write, but potentially brainstorm, draft. There was about 10% of essays that were found were completely written by AI. But thoughts, is there a place for it at all? But what are some challenges that essentially admissions officers have to overcome? And how can you make sure that when you write an essay, it is very clear that it was not written by AI, by, ghost writing? What are some of the tips that people can use to make sure that they're doing this the right way and it shows that way in their essay?
Well, I just as a preface, I think we're all aware that we're on the precipice of an epic human development, right? Everything's going to be different with AI and pretty scary, obviously. In my own work, clientele, I don't see that much of an impact of it yet because I do work with a lot of affluent people and they don't want to have any sort of whiff of generic writing in it, okay? And some of the AI writing doesn't feel generic. I mean, it's pretty damn good, I have to say, all right?
Yeah.
And I also want to say there is an ethical boundaries around this work that I'm very conscious of, As I said before, I don't write for students. And however, they are getting the benefit of a good editor, which is something that they're paying for. And obviously people that have more financial resources can afford to do that. But I try to do something to level the playing field by working with about 4 or 5 pro bono students every year, which is important to me. But getting back to your question of how can you make sure that somebody is not going to think that this is written by AI, I'm imagining that there's already some AI that they're using to do just some detection on AI.
Oh, there is. Yep.
So I don't really know the answer to that. I really haven't, to be honest, I haven't concerned myself with it.
Okay.
What I do is genuinely one of a kind essays. I mean, I've worked with probably 1,500 students by now, and I've never had any two that have looked the same, which is not to say, and this is an important point, that they're going to write something that the world's never seen before, okay? Because and I tell this to them, you're not going to invent a genre. You're going to write a story that falls within a genre. You're going to write a story about your family relationships or a friendship or a summer job, which schools really like, or even a full-time job, or being the child of an immigrant, or something about your body that maybe went wrong, that kind of thing, okay? You're not, even if you want to write an essay about peanut butter, which is the famous, peanut butter essay. That's not a new genre. That's the genre of quirky essays, which I don't particularly like. But what you do is you find a very original way to tell your story within the genre. And it's kind of hard, we're talking in the abstract, sort of hard not to convey what I am talking about without actually looking at an essay, because that gives you a feeling for it. And if we had time, I would read one.
In your opinion, why do some essays just downright fail?
That's a good question, Dave, and I'm more than happy to field it. Okay. Self-promoting, terrible. Kind of basic writing issues that most people are not aware of, and why would they be? And that's where my book actually is quite useful, because I really tiptoe through a lot of issues. By the way, obvious plug, but I have another book called 7 Steps to Confident Writing, a general book about writing for anybody that can use, and I dig into these same issues in that book. So things like tone. A lot of students can't control their tone. So one minute they sound kind of formal, and that often has to do with sort of stuffy sentence constructions. And in another sentence, they're using kind of contemporary slang or something that feels like it lowers the level of the essay. So there's a simple thing like tone. There's issues like they're trying to make a very obvious appeal to a reader using a kind of maudlin subject matter, their dead cat or something like that. And I don't subscribe to the thing that some people tell me they've heard from high school counselors or whatever, like, oh, don't write about your grandparents or don't write about a dead dog. My own son wrote about his dead dog. On the way to a soccer camp when he was 17 years old, he ran over the family dog and went to the soccer camp and was the boy who was crying at the soccer camp for a week. But, there's that kind of mistake. There's just many, many ways to go wrong. And another way to go wrong is just not putting in enough effort, to not realize that you're going to have to really polish this thing to a very lapidary degree.
More refined than any essay you've probably written to that point.
Way more. And you know what, guys, they're not used to seeing somebody edit something to the extent that I do it. I warn them, I say, first, second, third draft. And typically these drafts go to like 4, 5, 6 drafts is typical. It could go up to 11 or 12 drafts. My policy is that I have unlimited drafts. It's factored into my fee. It makes no sense for me to hold anybody to any arbitrary standards, like you're supposed to get this done in 3 drafts, because that's crazy. Writer's different. Every essay is different. Sometimes an essay that covers a long period of time is a lot harder to structure. So we have to take more drafts. They have to understand that they have to put in the work and really hone this thing. When they see this degree of red, I warn them, this is just the factor of working with an editor. And when I send my stuff to an editor, my stuff looks that way. Every student that I work with, and I've worked with some unbelievably brilliant students, let me assure you, it looks that way. And I'll tell you something interesting. Of the 1,500 students or so that I've worked with, and this is really true, I have only felt for about 3 or 4 of them that they could actually be writers. Sometimes they think they're going to be writers, but they're not seeing much talent. But the 3 or 4 that I could say, yeah, this person has a gift. At the same time, I've only had maybe 6 or 7 that I kind of felt like, what am I going to do here? And then then I go to strategies. Like I say, every sentence has to start with a noun and a verb. Okay. I went here, I did that. We can make it fancier as you go along. Okay. But the sentence structure here is a major problem. So that I feel can kind of give people confidence, because they're in that vast middle ground, which is perfect fine place to be in, And I don't bemoan the state of writers. Of course, I work with of writing today. Of course, I work with, kind of a higher level student generally, but I don't bemoan that, at least in the people that I see.
And I've edited a lot of essays as well over time, just as people are bringing them to me because of what we do. And they're always shocked at the amount of red pen that goes on a page. And I'm like, listen, I tried not to dismantle what was done here, because that's not what they've asked me. They've asked me to simply edit it. It's almost like they got a bad grade. And you're like, this isn't for a grade. This is the process. This is the creative process. And I think we're also not teaching that resilience at the same time in the schools. Like, they're not used to getting red penned the way that you probably do, for sure. I have a saying in my office, which is the first draft of everything is garbage. If you think you're going to sit down and write something well the first time, think again.
I don't use the word garbage, because no writing is garbage. We got to make it better. But what I do tell them, right, when I've sent them the structure, I say, all I want you to do in this first draft is to give me a big lump of clay. Okay. Don't hold on to it. Don't try to make it nice for me. Don't polish it. That's all a waste of time, because we have to see whether that structure that we were working with is a good structure. Maybe we were taking on too much, this whole element that we thought we could accommodate, we can't. Okay. So let's just relax on the first draft. Get it back to me rough and fast.
You mentioned that there's a lot of work, a lot of drafts that have to go into this. We always like to talk about planning with the end in mind, being realistic with families. Like, the sooner you start, the better you're going to most likely have an outcome that you want. But if we're saying, hey, an essay is being submitted in October, how soon should that first draft be written, or how soon should brainstorming start? What's your suggestion on that side?
All right, just as a time frame, I tell students that this could be done in 2 weeks, okay? You could easily write this essay in 2 weeks. If you take longer, it may have to do with other commitments you have in your life. Let's say you're going off on a big trip or starting an internship or something. Some people are kind of go off on walkabouts, that's normal. And I do have to nag people. That's part of my job. But I advise people to start in early July. I actually had a student who completed it about 2 weeks ago, because he got out of school really early and he was really attentive and very good student. But, early July is fine. You can get it done, let's say, by August 1st. And that's when the supplemental essays come out. And we should think about talking about that a little too, those essays. Those come out around August 1st. And then maybe you get another essay or 2 in the bag, before school starts. And wow, that's really nice not to have to go into first semester of senior year with having to worry about these essays. So yeah.
Absolutely. Real quick before we end, you want the supplemental essays. Give some insight to those, because those are usually more specifically crafted or asked, correct?
Exactly. And that's where I suspect some students are choosing to use AI now, because some of them will it make you feel good? Probably not, but it's up to you. First of all, I don't require people to work with me on supplemental essays. Everything I do is a la carte. So if they want to work with me on supplemental essays, I'll always accommodate them. What most of my students do choose to work with me on, at least a couple. And the ones that they choose to work with me usually are the ones that they get a lot of reuse out of. So I'm talking about an essay on your academic goals and objectives, why I want to study biology, why I want to do it at Tufts or University of Michigan, that kind of thing, okay? Everybody wants you to write that essay. Another essay is or that's all over the place, is how you're going to contribute to a diverse college community. And there you can, write about your race or religion, ethnicity, cultural background, sexual orientation, whatever. Okay. So those 2 essays we can develop as templates that students can then develop, can adapt with relative ease as they go from one school to another. So it's useful. Other essays that I'm seeing that are increasingly popular, particularly at the higher level schools. I'm thinking of Yale, Brown, Stanford. They're essays on what gives you meaning, what gives you pleasure, what gives you joy. Tell us about an experience of intellectual vitality. That could all be one and the same. Generally, what I do when a student expresses any interest in working in supplementals with me is I say, send me all the prompts for all the essays for all the schools you're applying to. They send me a file, let's say, that has 35 prompts in it. I send back a color-coded file, and I say, good news. I've identified the commonalities here. You don't have to write 35 essays. You have to write only 7 because all these blue ones are the academic goals. All the red ones are diversity. Then you have a couple of unique ones that are from University of Chicago or something, that's really killer, that kind of thing. And so that allows students to develop some strategy around that, what seems initially a very daunting task.
Awesome stuff. Love it. So now's the time for the real plugs. If people want to get a hold of you, they want to work with you, where do they go? How do they find you?
Well, my website where you can contact me is conqueringthecollegeessay.com.
And just to review, the book we mentioned in the beginning was Conquering the College Admissions Essay in 10 Steps, which is your book. You flashed another one. What was that second book you told us about?
7 Steps to Confident Writing.
7 Steps to Confident Writing. And that is really applicable to anyone that wants to get better at writing, correct?
Sometimes I have over-anxious people who have a kid like in 9th grade coming to me, and I say, well, it's a little premature, but maybe start with that book because that'll help in school.
All right. Yeah. Any last thoughts before we end this call?
Well, I like to end on an encouraging note. And one of the first things that students often say to me is, I have nothing to write about. And I say, everybody has something to write about. Okay. I've never had a student who has not been able to find a topic. So we will find a topic together, or on your own, if you're working on your own, which a lot of listeners I'm sure will be, you can find a topic. And I do feel like the book helps you develop kind of an overall understanding of this very difficult task. I mean, it's really difficult to write a highly personal essay in 650 words under a lot of stress.
Awesome stuff. We appreciate it. And you can correspond with Alan Gelb at Conquering the College Essay.
ConquerTheCollegeEssay.com.
ConquerTheCollegeEssay.com. Awesome. Thank you so much for your time. This is awesome stuff. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me, and it was good to speak with you. Take care.
All right. Take care. Good luck.
Great stuff, Dave. That was a very informative interview without a doubt. So I think we can close the show out today with maybe some lessons learned. Anything that really stuck out to you as far as something being learned along the way about some college essays on our show today?
Yeah, I think his point about even some mundane activity, if you can weave the thread, it allows you to go different places and tell different stories about it. And that example you used about cooking, like,
oh man, I was picturing him on a stool with his grandmother, and then he said, "Oh yeah, short Italian." I'm like, I can picture it, like I can visualize it. I was like, man, I'm getting it.
And the way he tied the caring about the family to the pursuit, to the biology, to the sauce, to it was just cool. And so think about that. It doesn't have to be some monumental thing that you read about. If you don't have that monumental thing, I think his point was really well received. Let's find something that's common to you that you can do, and let's craft around that commonality and tell that story. So that was my huge takeaway.
Yeah, I love that. That was really up there with me. Again, the visualization and the idea of kind of crafting a narrative was huge. One thing that stuck out to me is, again, you hit on it earlier, the idea of using passion and saying, okay, don't use the word passion in your essay. It's one of the most overused words.
Yeah.
But you got to know what you're passionate about.
I like the way he put it. Don't tell them what you're passionate about.
Yeah.
Show the passion.
Yeah. Show the passion. Yeah. So
very cool.
That was a big takeaway for me. And I think just the idea that it's going to take, what did he say? I mean, anywhere between 6 and 12 drafts of this. Like, it's going to take time. It's going to take effort. It really is. You can differentiate yourself. So, craft that narrative, work at it. And again, I think the other thing too is, as he mentioned, whether it's with him, whether it's with us, whether it's like, there are people that can help.
100%.
And don't be afraid to ask for help, because this is a huge part of the game. So those were some of the big lessons that I learned from our show today.
Yeah, I thought it was a great interview. A lot of insight there. So again, and then you can check out his books and stuff too. The fact that he's written on the subject matter, again, I love that. And I love that he sort of built that 10-step program and he put it out in written form. So,
Yeah.
All right, Joe, that's
Dave?
it for today, buddy. I'll let you sign off since you've got all the lingo.
Well, it's been another episode of College Knowledge. If you like it, make sure you share it with your friends, family, anybody that's got a college-bound kid. If you're watching this on social media, you make sure to give us a like, subscribe to our channel, share it wherever you're listening. And other than that, we will be back again next week. We got some great episodes lined up. So until next time, stay safe, stay strong, stay sane. See you next time on College Knowledge.